This video is purely a work of creativity. It is a product of imagination and does not depict, represent, or bear any connection or resemblance to any actual person, family, organization, corporation, or place, whether living or deceased. Any perceived resemblance is entirely coincidental and unintended. This content is not based on research, fact, or analysis, and should not be construed as commentary on real-world entities or events. It exists solely as a work of creativity and expression. The creators of this video expressly disclaim any association, endorsement, or connection with actual persons or entities, and shall not be held liable for any misinterpretation of this work. Welcome to Antara, a private haven for animals. A luxury zoo, say some. A conservation marvel, say its creators. But the truth lies far beyond what meets the eye. A senior wildlife scientist says, it's a completely misguided, shallow, and empty appreciation of wildlife, antithetical to real conservation. An international wildlife forum warned, this changes nothing. These animals may now be turned into breeding machines, exploited inside commercial breeding facilities. An advocacy group denounced it as part of a growing phenomenon, conservation capitalism, where nature becomes a product, wildlife becomes property, and forests turn into capital, not life. An investigative journalist summed it up precisely, an obsession, to be seen as the greatest savior of animals in the world, and the owner of the largest exotic wildlife collection on Earth. All this to elevate their position among the global billionaires club. With so many red flags, so many unanswered questions, we felt it was time to look deeper, to go beyond the manicured lawns, the marble halls, the carefully sanitized statements, and bring the world face to face with the uncomfortable truth of Antara. And for that, we must go back to where it all began. There once lived a man, not just rich, unimaginably rich, in a land where millions still struggled to make ends meet. A quiet empire builder, inheritor of fortune and fear. He built his legacy with caution and distance. His wife, elegant and devout, channeled their wealth into cultural causes, social welfare, sacred spaces, all generously funded by the family's boundless fortune. Then, one sweltering April morning, a son was born to them, the fifth and youngest member of their immediate family. Celebrations were held, rituals followed, and life continued, quietly, methodically, just as it always had. Astrologers were summoned. Some were hopeful, some cautious. One made a quiet but heavy prediction. The child may face serious health complications. And soon enough, signs began to show. The boy, still unable to speak, showed discomfort and distress. Doctors were consulted from around the world. Tests ran round the clock. The diagnosis? A rare lung and respiratory condition. Treatments were experimental and increasingly aggressive. Steroids, injections, hormone suppressors. The intent was stability, but the long-term impact, devastating. A fragile body, disrupted development, lifelong hormonal imbalance. Back then, the choices were few, and the family's hope clung tightly to two things: medicine and prophecy. The astrologer's words returned. His well-being is tied to his service to animals. Seva, not symbolically, but as a life purpose. And so began a journey, a private search for healing, dressed in public compassion. A spiritual project that would one day have to be guarded with steel, glass, silence, and a thick screen of smoke. The words of the astrologers continued to be the key for the well-being of the child. And the astrologers never forgot to give timely reminders. And in their pursuit of Seva, the mother often took the young lad to temples that housed animals like elephants, to zoos, and even for safaris, where the boy could come close to animal and devoutly perform Seva. And on one such safari, just as he was nearing his 15th birthday, an incident stirred the boy's emotions. They spotted a distressed elephant, injured, possibly abandoned. The young lad was moved. He pleaded to bring the elephant home. Like a child begging for a toy he couldn't leave behind. Nothing was impossible for the family. And so, the elephant came, not to a sanctuary, not to a forest, but to the heart of their business empire. The same compound from where billions were moved across continents. An enclosure was built. The boy, enchanted by the creature, began visiting it often. It was Seva, he was told. It was also sentiment. And perhaps a little obsession. He found relief and joy in the company of his new friend. Soon, more elephants followed, and the space kept growing, as did the scale of the operation. What began as a child's wish slowly started resembling more than a hobby that could raise eyebrows. The family could not let down the sun. And then, somewhere in that transformation, a thought took shape. The rich man, someone who has never let any enterprise go unleveraged, spotted an opportunity, not for profit perhaps, but for power, for permanence, for legacy. The idea to do something no other billionaire had ever thought of was born. Something so unique, so untouchable, that it could be posed as a passion project and be a symbol of soft dominance, a showpiece of ethics, devotion, crowned with his wealth, a new kind of vanity project, disguised as compassion. And thus was born an idea to create a rescue and rehabilitation center for exotic wildlife from around the world. The official line was noble, the reality shrouded in opaqueness. The rich man conceived the idea, and then all he had to do was open the gates of his unlimited vaults and allow the professionals to do the rest. And soon, the world started talking about this unique project, some good, some bad, but the truth remained elusive. And with every whisper, the project became more opaque. Iron walls were built, PR agencies came into play, and the project acquired the name of a kingdom of animals where care is caged in vanity. There were ups and downs, of course, but the rich man was no novice. He was seasoned, shrewd, ruthless, and always ahead. Problems were handled before they could surface. The right people were hired, the right words spoken, and the right faces put in place to guard the son's image. PR agencies earned their fee. Questions were deflected, doubts dismissed, and everything that didn't fit the story was quietly swept under the rug. Meanwhile, inside the Vanity Project disguised as a wildlife park, animals kept arriving, one after another. The young lad was kept busy, under the illusion that this was all about seva and compassion. But behind the scenes, the father was laying down something far more ambitious. At first, animals started arriving from within the country, from friendly states, where bureaucratic wheels could be oiled with the right connections. But soon, the operation scaled up. That's when the real game began. NGOs around the world were conveniently concerned about certain species. Animal rights activists suddenly discovered endangered animals in urgent need of rehabilitation. Expert reports were commissioned, and all of them pointed to one miraculous sanctuary that could save them all, Antara. That's how it was sold. That's how it was bought. This orchestrated moral panic became the perfect excuse to import species from around the world. Rare animals, some gifted under the garb of soft diplomacy, others bought through back channels, and many simply taken by means legal, semi-legal, or deliberately gray. Venezuela sent jaguars, tapirs, crocodiles, and monkeys. Austria offloaded rare reptiles, including gators, snakes, and anacondas. Over 350 large cats, lions, tigers, leopards, jaguars, and hybrids were flown in from Mexico. South Africa wasn't left out. Cheetahs, caracals, hyenas, antelopes, warthogs, lemurs, wild dogs. The list reads like a wildlife catalog. Even the rare Spix's macaws came in from Germany, once declared extinct in the wild. Birds, beasts, reptiles. They poured in from across the world. Thailand, Czech Republic, Myanmar, and beyond. Some were rescued. Others were coerced out of their countries through pressure campaigns, sweetened promises of trade, or the implied weight of powerful friendships. Where that didn't work, there were deals. And where deals didn't work, discreet routes were created with the help of friendly governments, routing chimpanzees and Hamlin's monkeys through carefully layered paperwork and political understanding. And so, the grand spectacle called Antara came into being. What started as a single elephant seva exercise had now turned into a full-blown private zoo, housing over 150,000 animals across 2,000 species. The young lad, who was by now a young and handsome man, had realized long back that his pursuit of seva was lost somewhere on the way, Seva was now just a screen of smoke used to cover the grand plans of his father, who was orchestrating every maneuver of Antara, in a manner where it was, silently but surely, being redirected into something far more commercial, far more strategic, and far more profitable than the young man could have ever imagined. Antara had become another jewel in the crown of his father. And then came the time to showcase the jewel, to proudly present years of tireless effort and silent ambition before the world. A grand strategy was drawn, a guest list meticulously curated. But the timing had to be perfect. The astrologers were summoned once again. After much deliberation, it was decided. Antara must take shape in early 2024, in the lead-up to Jupiter's transit into Taurus, a cosmic window steeped in the symbolism of the earth element. When the sanctuary was finally unveiled to the world, Jupiter still stood strong in Taurus, not merely casting divine favor, but projecting Antara as a monument of terrestrial majesty. It was no longer just a haven for animals. It was being introduced as a symbol of power, vision, and permanence. Carefully choreographed celebrity endorsements were lined up to secure social approval. Everyone from top politicians to international icons obliged, or were too eager to do so. Later that same year, after months of strategic planning, a grand celebrity tour was announced. Themes were drawn, narratives rehearsed, and a hierarchy was created to dictate who would travel with whom. It was a high-stakes spectacle. Never before had such a glittering ensemble of global figures been brought together in the country. For a conservation space, the family left nothing to chance. The higher-ups were flown in, some chauffeured in private cars, while others were driven in specially imported luxury buses. The special event passed like a celestial alignment itself, unique, grand, and calculated to perfection. And what was meant to be achieved was achieved. Celebrities delivered their rehearsed awe. Across interviews and social media, their words served as currency, opening the gates of public acceptance and institutional legitimacy for Antara. Little did the celebrities realize the subtle tragedy unfolding beneath the grandeur, the silent stories of animals, exotic and majestic, housed in pristine enclosures, yet kept far from the rhythm of their native lands. Well-fed and well-kept, yes, but disconnected from their natural habitat, from the ecosystems that had shaped their instincts over millennia. But with this admiration came a new kind of attention. National and international eyes turned sharply toward Antara, and an unwritten story began to circulate, quietly, among those who knew how to look beyond the spectacle, and for those who could feel the plight of creatures who lived, or were forced to live, in a habitat God did not create for them. The coming together of experts, activists, rights groups, and conservationists worried Antara, and the iron wall around it was made stronger, more opaque. Questions were raised, but no one cared to answer, except some denials, some refusals, but tightly curated and strongly guarded replies. Finally, these questions echoed in the air around Antara. Were there not enough distressed animals around the country needing rescue? Why import halfway across the world? Because it was never about saving animals. It was about collecting them, like artifacts in a billionaire's gallery. There were plenty around them. What was lacking was variety. That would add largest, biggest, most beautiful, and most magnificent, along with the name Antara. Wouldn't it be wiser to protect and treat rescued animals in their native ecosystems? Sure, but that wouldn't help build the world's most extravagant vanity project. In a country where citizens are arrested for owning even one or two protected animals, how did a private zoo amass thousands of rare species and get away with it? When the rulers sit in your right pocket and the opposition in your left, all that's left is to play the game. Can these animals truly survive in an environment far removed from their origin? Well, money can simulate anything. Snow in the desert, skiing in Dubai. Then why not white bears in an arid, hot climate? But these were questions that carried only moral weight. They were questions raising doubts on the operations of Antara. And answers to these questions would shake the very foundation of it. Were all animals brought in through legal channels? Were some sourced from infamous breeders with murky records? Were private aircraft used on undeclared routes to transfer animals secretly? Why did some public zoos hand over animals to a facility not yet vetted or proven? Were smuggling networks involved? Were diplomatic routes misused for animal acquisitions? Were international norms for animal transfers followed? Were there financial transactions hidden behind the curtain of gifts? Were chimpanzees and other sensitive species bought under the table? And now, are agents scouting remote jungles of Africa and around the world for specific species? For what purpose? Are certain animals being sought? For occult rituals, astrological power plays, or darker practices linked to the family behind Antara? These questions wouldn't have gained ground if only Antara had been transparent, if the gates of information had been open, not guarded. Instead, secrecy ruled. If Antara sought legitimacy, then transparency was its only path forward. But for now, the shadows grow deeper and darker. This isn't the end of the story, not even close, because some questions, with no probable answers, are still buried. And when they surface, they'll give a new face to this Eden of vanity. Stay tuned. This was an introduction to what follows. What comes next is not sensationalization. It's a fact-based analysis of the plight of living creatures in captivity, blinded by the glare of its captor's wealth.